During a family road trip, my parents pulled over and told me to get out because I refused to give my savings to my sister. My mother smirked, "Figure out how to get home on your own." I smiled and said, "Actually, I already have a ride." Their faces dropped when a luxury car pulled up and we were about 5 hours into what was supposed to be a fun family road trip when my parents pulled the car over to the side of the road. The air was thick with tension. My dad's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. My mom sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, her mouth pressed into that thin-lipped smirk she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. I already knew what was coming. "Get out," my mom said flatly. I didn't move at first. I just sat there, looking at the both of them, waiting for them to laugh or tell me this was some kind of sick joke. But they weren't joking. "You're serious?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. My sister, sitting smugly in the backseat, let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh my God, just get out already." See, this all started because I refused to hand over my savings to my younger sister. She had blown through her own money, again, on God knows what. Shopping, trips, or some new obsession she'd inevitably get bored of in a few months. This wasn't the first time she'd begged for my money, and my parents had always backed her up. This time, though, I put my foot down. And now, here we were. My dad finally turned in his seat to glare at me. "You want to act selfish? Fine. You're an adult. Figure out how to get home on your own." My mom's smirk deepened. "Let's see how independent you really are." My sister giggled. They thought they had me. They thought this was their ultimate power move. Abandoning me on the side of the road, hours from home, with nothing but my phone and wallet. They thought I'd be desperate, panicked, maybe even in tears, begging them to take me back. But I wasn't. Because unlike them, I planned ahead. I smiled. Slowly. Casually. Not a hint of worry on my face. "Actually," I said, reaching for my phone, "I already have a ride." My parents' faces twitched with confusion. Then, right on cue, a sleek black luxury car, one my family could never afford in their wildest dreams, pulled up behind us, engine purring smoothly. My mom's smirk vanished. My dad's jaw tightened. My sister, for the first time in her life, looked actually speechless. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped someone they never expected. And that's when everything changed. The car door swung open, and out stepped Nathan, a man my parents had no idea I even knew. Nathan wasn't just anyone. He was rich, the kind of rich my parents always sneered at, pretending they didn't envy. And unlike my family, he actually respected me. He walked around the car, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit, looking every bit like someone who had never had to beg for money a day in his life. His eyes flickered between my parents and me before he spoke. "You ready?" he asked, his voice calm, completely ignoring my parents. I nodded, grabbing my bag from the seat beside me. My mom snapped out of her shock first. "Who the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice a mix of anger and panic. I shrugged. "A friend." My dad leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "What kind of friend?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took my sweet time getting out of the car, stretching like I wasn't just thrown out onto the side of the road by my own family. I turned to face them, enjoying the way my mom's expression had turned from smug confidence to barely concealed worry. Then I dropped the bomb. "Nathan owns the company I work for." Silence. My dad's face twitched like he'd just been slapped. My mom's eyes darted to Nathan's suit, the car, then back to me. My sister, for once, wasn't smirking. "You work for him?" my mom finally asked, as if the idea was impossible. "No," Nathan cut in, his tone sharp. "She doesn't work for me. She works with me." The distinction made my parents' faces tighten. See, they had always treated me like I was nothing. Like I was just there to be a walking ATM for my sister. They never paid attention to my career, never asked how I was doing, never bothered to notice how much I had actually built for myself over the years. I had worked my ass off to get where I was. I had connections. I had options. And now, they were finally realizing that they had no control over me anymore. Nathan glanced at his watch. "We should get going," he said casually, like this wasn't the most awkward, tension-filled moment of my parents' lives. I smiled. Right. I turned back to my parents, who were still sitting there, staring at me like I was a stranger. "You wanted me to figure out how to get home on my own?" I said, tilting my head. "Well, I did. My mom's lips pressed together. Don't be dramatic. Just get back in the car. I let out a short laugh. Oh, no. You made your choice, I said, stepping closer to Nathan's car. Now, you get to live with it. Nathan opened the door for me, and as I slid into the plush leather seat, I could still see my parents in the rearview mirror. They looked furious. They had lost. But what they didn't know was, I wasn't done yet. Not even close. As the luxury car pulled back onto the road, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Nathan glanced at me. You okay? I nodded, forcing a small smile. Yeah. Just processing. But in reality, I was furious. Not because they abandoned me, I had expected that. But because they thought they could just throw me away like I was nothing, like my entire existence only mattered if I was useful to them. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. As we sped down the highway, my phone started blowing up with messages. I expected angry texts from my mom, maybe my dad. But what I didn't expect was a text from my aunt. Aunt Lydia? Are you okay? Aunt Lydia, your mom just called me ranting. Something about you leaving with some rich guy. Aunt Lydia, she sounded nervous. I stared at my screen. Nervous. My mother didn't get nervous. She got angry. She got controlling. But nervous? That was new. Nathan glanced at my phone. Something wrong? I hesitated, then handed it to him. He skimmed the messages, then let out a small hum. Interesting, he said. She's panicking. I frowned. Why would she panic? She won. Nathan shot me a look like I had just said something ridiculous. No, she didn't, he said. She just realized she lost control. And that's when it clicked. My whole life, my parents had made me feel like I needed them. Like I was only stable, only successful, because of them. But now? They had just proven that I didn't. I leaned back, a slow grin forming on my face. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I might do next. I spent the next 2 days ignoring their calls. The more I ignored them, the more desperate their messages became. My dad started with anger, calling me ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment. My mom tried guilt, telling me how much I was hurting the family. My sister. She sent me nothing. That was a huge red flag. My sister lived to rub things in my face. If she wasn't texting, it meant something was wrong. I decided to dig a little deeper. Now, here's something my parents didn't know. I had access to more resources than they thought. Nathan wasn't just my mentor. He was also a man with connections. The kind that could pull financial records, background checks, everything. So, I asked him for a favor. What he found blew my mind. The third twist, why they really wanted my money. My parents weren't just trying to steal my savings from my sister. They were in serious debt. I'm talking tens of thousands. Credit cards maxed out, unpaid loans, and, the biggest shocker, a second mortgage on the house they never told me about. And the worst part, they used my name for one of the loans. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Nathan was calm as he handed me the documents. You could press charges, he said. This is fraud. Fraud. My own parents had stolen from me. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why they always pushed me to hand over money. Why they never wanted me to check financial documents. Why my mom looked nervous when I left with Nathan. Because she knew. She knew that if I ever found out, I could ruin them. And now, I had a choice. I could confront them. I could demand the money back. Or, I could burn everything down. I stared at the papers, my hands tightening around the edges. My whole life, they had treated me like I was nothing. Like I was disposable. Now, it was their turn to feel powerless. I looked at Nathan. What's the best way to make them suffer? He smirked. And that's when we put the plan in motion. I spent years being their backup plan, their safety net. They used me, lied to me, and when I stopped being useful, they tossed me aside. Now, it was my turn. I wasn't going to just get my money back. I was going to make sure they lost everything. I didn't say a word to them. I didn't let them know I knew. I let them panic. And oh, did they panic. My phone was flooded with messages. My mom's tone switched from guilt-tripping to desperate. My dad, the one who always acted so strong and in control, even called Nathan, the man they had mocked just days before, asking to speak to me. Nathan, being the petty king he was, put him on speakerphone. "Look," my dad said, voice tight. "We need to talk. You can't just run off like this." Nathan smirked. "She didn't run off. You kicked her out." Silence. I could almost hear my dad's teeth grinding. "That's not the point. This is family business. She needs to come back." I finally spoke. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because," he inhaled sharply. "Because we're struggling, okay? You don't understand how hard things have been for us. We just needed some help, and you just left." Oh. Oh, this was good. They still thought they could manipulate me. That I'd hear the word family and come running back like an obedient little ATM. Too bad for them, I wasn't that person anymore. "I'll think about it," I said. And then I hung up. Nathan chuckled. "You are so much more patient than I am." I smiled. They're about to get exactly what they deserve. First, I locked down my credit. I froze everything. No more loans in my name, no more credit cards they could sneakily open. Then, I went to the bank and reported the fraud. I filed a police report. I handed over every document Nathan had pulled, proving that my parents had taken out loans under my name. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I wouldn't fight back. Oh, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. A week later, I got the call. My mom's voice was frantic. They're saying we committed fraud." "What did you do?" I leaned back, holding in a laugh. "What did I do?" I repeated. "You mean, what you did?" Her voice cracked. "We're going to lose the house." I let the words settle. They were losing everything. Their debt had finally caught up to them. The loans they had taken out. The house they had mortgaged. The payments they had ignored. It all collapsed on them at once. And without me there to bail them out, they had nowhere to turn. I smiled. "Well," I said, voice sweet, "maybe my sister can help you." My mom let out a sharp breath. "She doesn't have any money. You know that." Oh, the irony. I stayed quiet, letting her stew in her own mess. Then she snapped. "You can't do this to us. We're your parents." I tilted my head. "Oh, no. You did this to yourselves." Then I hung up. And just like that, I was free. A month later, I got a text from my aunt. "Aunt Lydia, they moved in with your sister. The bank took the house. They're miserable." I stared at the message for a second. Then, I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't care. No guilt. No regret. They had tried to ruin me. But in the end, they only ruined themselves. And I was finally free.